We're live. It is 8:04, so I'm a little bit late, but I did just get back from the movie theater. So I went to see the new Formula One movie with my family, and it was awesome. I thought it was great. I'm done racing, all kinds of stuff, and did a lot of road racing stuff. That was really what I liked the most, and the Bonneville stuff. But it was very cool. I know that. When Tom Cruise was when they did Days of Thunder, his original intention was to do a Formula One race, but they said no, that we're not going to allow that. But apparently they changed their mind with this thing. Obviously, many years later, and it was very cool. It was a good movie, good plot, all that stuff, good Formula One racing and stuff. I definitely recommend it. The other thing is for tonight anyways, what I want to talk about are the turbos that we have. So we have new turbos in stock. So in addition to the turbos that we have done the testing on, we've done testing on a lot of turbos, but the ones that we are offering initially and the ones that we just did the testing on with Jimmy putting on his Tahoe, and we're going to be seeing more of that stuff. We have the GTX 3584 RS, which we basically call our 800 horsepower turbo. It's rated at way more than that. It's rated at 900. But normally when they give you those ratings are at some high pressure ratio designed for a smaller motor kind of thing. So if you put it on a 2J or a K series or something, it'll make more power, because on a bigger LS, you're going to have more back pressure with that. But we like that one because it's very, very responsive. So if a guy has a 4.8 or 5.3 or whatever he wants to put it on there, it's fantastic. If you want to make more power, and we ran these on the engine dyno and then put them on with our turbo kit that we're developing. We did a bunch of testing on Jimmy's Tahoe, and we ran the G42. And quite honestly, I was very surprised at how well the G42 did on the 5.3 on the street. I would have no problem at all with a 5.3, and this one's a stock one. This is a stock 5.3 with a stock everything, stock head, stock intake, stock cam, all that. It's a 350,000 mile Tahoe motor, 5.3. So I have no problem driving that around with the G42 on it. And if that's all the turbo that you have ever put on there, it would do everything that you want. It does boost, it makes lots of power, it does everything great. What we've done now is, because one of these is an 800 horsepower turbo, we were calling it, the other one's a 1200. The G42 is capable of doing 1200. We have other ones now, mostly because people have asked for them. But the other ones that we have in stock are both the G42 and the GTX 3584 RS turbos that we have are journal bearing. Now we also have a couple of ball bearing 3584 RS turbos. So if you want to get a ball bearing version of that, we have a couple of those in stock. We also have the GTX 3584 RS turbo with a bigger AR hot side. So you can see in the video that I put up fairly recently before I went on vacation that we did some testing with, instead of the 8.2, I think the original was an 8.2 AR, we went to a 121 housing, a hot side. So all we do is change the hot side, is just take one off, put the other one on. We ran the test in the real world, in the vehicle, on a chassis dyno, out on the street, like God and nature intended it. And so it did the things that you would expect. It was a little softer in spool up, but could ultimately make more power. And so this could be a good application for, we have guys that have asked about the 3584 RS turbo on a 6-liter. So if you put a bigger AR on the hot side, the turbo would be basically, I think, better suited to a 6-liter. The 3584 is going to be very, very responsive, either on a 4.8 or a 5.3, and ultra responsive on a 6-liter. So much so that anymore, I don't really recommend that turbo for 6-liter guys. I definitely, again, judging by how well the G42 worked, driving around and just using it for fun or towing or whatever you wanted to do, the G42 worked really good on the 5.3. So on a 6-liter, that would be my go-to turbo. For guys that want stuff in between the 3584 and the G42 that we have some in between there. The first one that we have is the 3584 with the bigger hot side. So we went from 8.2 to a 121. It would shift it over toward the G42 and away from the ultra responsive one. So for a 6 liter, that is a possibility. The other two that we have that are available, possibly, and again, between these two, between the 800 horsepower turbo and the 1200 horsepower turbo, we have two G35s. They're both G35 1050s. It's just that we have them available both in T4 flanged hot sides and V-band hot sides. So again, if you want something that's a little bit more than, a little bit more between the 800 and the 1200, and you want a bigger turbo that's capable of making more power, a G35 will do that. Both of those, let's see. Yeah, I think that both of those are ball bearing turbos. So we have the GTX available in ball bearing. We have the G35s in T4 and V-band in ball bearing. Then we have the journal bearing 3584 with a bigger housing. We have the G42. And later on, we're getting some of the mirror image versions of the 3584s. So you can have ones that look symmetrical when you put them in, or both the things are kind of facing each other, and then you could blow into your air to water intercooler, whatever you want it to do. For the people that are asymmetrically challenged, you can put this on there and make it work. So we got a lot of stuff that's kind of in between there. And then we may do something later on. And if we've talked about this before, but if we wanted to go beyond the 1200, you could put two 3584s on something, and that could take you to 15 or 1600 or even more now that you have basically reduced the back pressure dramatically by putting one on each side of the motor. So it probably could support more, but it would work really well. We have one guy that's ordered two of the G42s to put on his 400-inch motor, and he's running lots of boost on it. And so he's going to be, that's going beyond 2,000 horsepower potentially. Got something like that. We got turbos for it, or two of the anything below that. So if you don't want 2,400 horsepower with a turbo, you can go 1,600 or 1,700 horsepower, and then with these G35s, you can kind of space everything in between there, or with a bigger hot size if you wanted to do that. I don't know that I would go with a bigger hot side 3584 on a twin application unless you were really wanting to, for some reason, cranking it up. But again, if you're going there like a 121 hot side on a 3584 in twins, I think I'd just go to a bigger turbo. Like I put two 35s on it, because then you could make all the power that you want. And so we got a lot of stuff. And so if you guys are interested, please go to richardholdnerperformance.com. We have that stuff available. All that stuff's in stock right now. And I don't know if Jimmy has put up the G35 stuff yet or the 121, but we'll have that up so that you guys can take a look at that. And it'll be, like I said, it's one of the things I didn't want to do is have a whole bunch of stuff in between here. But we'll see. We'll see what people want and kind of what they gravitate towards. Honestly, I think between the two that we already had basically almost everything that I wanted covered. But, hey, more choice obviously is also good. We're going to do a test with a journal bearing and a ball bearing turbo like we did with the change in AR. I don't suspect that we see a whole bunch doing that test, but we'll test it and see. And I think it's probably better. I could test it on the engine dyno, but honestly, I think it probably will be better to test it on a chassis dyno. And the way that we're testing this, rather than a loaded, third gear kind of thing, I think that the second gear thing would tend to show more of a response rate thing change, which is kind of what guys are looking for on a ball bearing turbo. I don't think they're going to see it, honestly. I think once the journal bearing has oil in there, I don't think you're giving away friction. I don't think you're getting a gain from a ball bearing setup rather than the other one. I think Robert did an excellent job at Force Performance when he was talking about it, that it's just more reliability, basically. I know that I've seen guys post stuff on YouTube or wherever, Facebook, on how they gained all of this response from, it's a dual ball bearing turbo. That's great. But if there's oil on these journal bearings, between the bearing and the surface, it's not riding on anything. It's riding on oil, and there's not going to be a lot of load there. So, but we want to test it anyways, because we just like we want to test all these exhaust setups, you know, the stock exhaust, an aftermarket catback, a bigger downpipes, all that stuff. So like we did all the testing on that, because more data is just better. I mean, the more information, the accurate information that we can get out there, I will not ever stop doing that. I will continue to test stuff so that we can talk intelligently about it when people have questions about it, and we can tell them, look, don't spend your money on stuff. Don't spend your money on this and this and this, because it's just not like with the throttle body we were talking about last night. It's not going to do anything. You got a stock 4.8. You don't need a 102 millimeter throttle body. And so hopefully the information that we'll put out there is will be beneficial to a lot of people. Jimmy was doing some tests. He sent me some videos over of the boost gauge, and I just had him turn the boost up to like 10 pounds or whatever, so we could, you know, see the boost gauge swinging when he's out driving around and stuff. So that's kind of cool. Everybody seems to love that. And then we'll compare. What we want to do is compare the boost response. We'll show you the boost response of the G42 versus the 3584, and you guys will kind of be able to see. I'm excited about the on the road test of the 3584 because of how responsive I know it's going to be. So it will definitely be kind of cool. But let's see what you guys got going on for tonight. I haven't been able to watch your Dragman. Haven't been able to watch the live stream lately. So glad to watch it today. There you go. Michael, Jordan, what's going on? Cajun, turbo-y goodness. I need to find a front yoke for the drive shaft of the van because I have a small block 727. I'm twisting it this time 45 degrees. Yeah, that is better than having it snap though. Richard, now to complete the family, you need to get the counter rotating GTX for some mirror action. Yeah, we went over that. I'm twin charging a Mercedes C32 AMG supercharged V6 with the rear mount 3584 after watching your 3.8 twin charge dyno videos. Yeah, it definitely does work. And if you're, I think that I don't know what that motor makes naturally aspirated without the supercharger, but with a supercharger, it will be a lot more responsive to that turbo. And that turbo can make a lot of power, especially on the smaller motor like that. Turbo supplier told me the 6870 is what I want for my combo. Decided to trust him. He is their buck guy. HPD says it will spool fast. Okay. Good to see you, Getaway. Trips on the road again. Yeah, the Formula One movie was good. I thought Brad Pitt did an excellent job, and all the people did. I thought that they did a great job. It was definitely, and we went to see it in a movie theater, which I haven't done a bunch of those. I think we went to see one other one. We went to see the Ballerina movie, the John Wick movie, and that was also good. I like John Wick's all shooting explosions and knives and jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and stuff, all the kinds of crazy stuff. You know, that's nothing but good. So good stuff. On the turbos, I don't think we're going to see mirror image turbos for a little bit, but those would be cool. Again, in fact, we were contemplating when we first started with just the two turbos. We were wondering whether or not people would want twins for something that was like in between this. Like, would guys want twins that for like 1,000 horsepower? And then how many would want that? Because, you know, if you do twins, you got to have two wastegates. And so it's a more expensive proposition. It looks cool, particularly if you do the mirror image stuff. It looks very cool. It looks symmetrical, you know, two lines going into an air-to-water intercooler or up front to an air-to-air or whatever, however you route it. But just having two of them is cool. But again, for a low buck LS guy, I don't know that that's the way to go. I think because we've talked to customers that have said, oh yeah, I'm just going to buy two inexpensive turbos. And we're like, yeah, but then you got to buy two wastegates also, which by the way, we will have wastegates coming in before too long here. We did a bunch of testing on wastegates and we found some good ones. We're going to be using, I think, 50 millimeter gates for the turbo kit. We have bigger ones also if we want, but we didn't really need it. Out on the street, the boost control is fine, and on the dyno, it's fine. Just on the engine dyno is the only place where I ever seem to have any kind of issue. We've been running Turbo Smart stuff on there, which they do an excellent job. But back to the twin turbos, I just don't know that, like, if you could get a single turbo to make 1,000 plus horsepower, 1,200 or whatever, like the G42, I just don't know that a guy would want to spend more money on putting 2 turbos there. Is it that it looks good enough? It's not going to be more responsive. It's going to be about the same if you size the turbos so that they make the same power. The response rate would be at least comparable. So there's no big gain there. It really is just kind of an aesthetic thing. It might also be a fitment thing, because maybe you have positions where you can only fit 2 smaller turbos and not one bigger turbo off to one side, which is like, we ran into that issue doing the prototype of the turbo kit. See, you got to move some things around to make it fit in an engine bay where, hey, let's put a turbo there where it was not designed to go, and where there's stuff there already. So you have to, presto changeo, rearrangeo, and that's, it gets hard to do that. And then you got to also not just move things, but you got to move and shield things, because turbo stuff gets hot. The exhaust, the wastegate, all that stuff, that gets hot. So you got to make sure that you not only can make it fit, but it's got to fit with no other things close to it, so that when it's driving around and being hot, that it doesn't melt the other things that were never designed to have like that sort of hot stuff in there. You set the air-to-water intercooler between the frame rails behind the bumper. We have it down low on our kit, down below the bumper. Any T3 stuff? We're not going to probably offer T3 stuff. Like they do turbo on my D16, but rather go through you if possible. I don't think we have anything that's going to be that small. You're going to want a T3 or maybe even a T28 or something. I don't know how much power you're trying to make. I might have something laying around, either a new or used one that could be a T3. Hashlinger, what's going on? I need a good street strip turbo. Any idea on a budget? Yeah, Daryl, just tell me what kind of power you're trying to make. All of the turbos that I mentioned are good street strip turbos. The M112 Mercury NA is 220 horsepower, 350 horsepower supercharged, factory twin screw. Not sure our horsepower gain with adding the turbo. That's your guess. E84 force induction. If you guys can put ring gap in it, and if you guys can control the timing and the fuel, and running the supercharger with that, you can just max the turbo out. So if you put a 3584 on there, you can make, on that motor, you could make 800 plus horsepower if you wanted to do that. Well, 355 small block with no ring gap lasted 8-ish pounds with a turbo. The problem is nobody can answer that, because we don't know. We don't know what your gap is. We don't know how much temperature you're going to impart on that. Right now, I can tell you that we're running around in the Tahoe at that kind of boost level with a very high mileage 5.3 without any problems. But again, we don't know what the gap is. And if we break it and we're stuck on the side of the road, that's on us. And we'll have to take the motor out and put another one in and fix it or whatever. Probably put a different one in that we went ahead and put ring gap in. And we're going to do that on Jimmy's Tahoe. We're going to take it apart and put ring gap in it. But more, I think Jimmy wants to take the motor out. We want to fix the rear main seal that's leaking. That's kind of typical of high mileage deals. Take it apart, put ring gap in it. We'll put head studs on it. We'll do a super razor blade rebuild. Probably do as part of the razor blade rebuild, we will reseal the exhaust valves. Just put the lapping compound on them, and spin them with a drill and stuff. Just get them seated a little bit better. And other than that, though, not expensive machining, just more like a wire wheel and then spinning it with a drill. But then we can test put head studs on it. We'll put ARPs on it because I like ARP stuff. I know some guys don't want to spend the money on it, but that's one thing I would spend money on. We'll put new head gaskets on it because when we take the old ones apart, we're going to scrape everything off, put new ones on there. put ring gap in it, and then put it back together and put it in, and then we'll probably just put the stock heads back on it, and after we redo them, and then that way we can safely turn the boost up. It has a 525 pump in it. It has 1,000 cc injectors in it, so we can run fairly high with the 85, and if we need to do more than that, we'll look at a different pump. I don't know what the AR is on the G35. I'll have to ask Jimmy. Do you ever watch drag races on YouTube? I don't really watch drag racing that much. Have you tested variable geometry turbos? Only factory ones. Some of the old Dodge stuff was variable geometry. Turbo and a 3UZ and see where it fails. Probably rods. – 10-to-1 motor. If that's the 355, Jacob, yeah. The compression just means that you have to have enough octane and good intercooling and good air going into the turbo and all that stuff. You just have to have the tune spot on for whatever octane you're using. But having ring gap in it would be important. Richard, looking to purchase aftermarket LS7 heads. What are your thoughts on RPM heads versus PCR 285 heads for reliability? Willing to sacrifice horsepower for reliability? 550 wheel horsepower, mild cam daily. Or do you have an LS7? And how much of a gain are you going to get from stock heads to aftermarket ported LS7 heads on something that has a mild cam in it? Like, are you going to get a gain at all? Or are you just worried about the factory LS7 heads, like dropping valve seats or whatever? Richard, I just bought a low mileage 8.1. Love the turbo testing. Plan on doing it. Yeah, it works good. Mike from what was one of the viewers here, he's the guy that gave me the 6-figure that we did a bunch of testing on. He has one. He has an 8.1 on his 3500. And he's got 600,000+ miles on it, towing, driving it every day with the turbo on it. And so it's an 8.1, so it works good. FYI, the Mercedes V6 is a 3.2 liter 3-valve twin plug factory 4-bolt main forged crank and rod, same as the famous E55 with 2 less cylinders. Okay, that's fine. You still need to have like ring gap. Is still a good idea. I'm never worried about hurting the block or the crank. Rods and pistons usually are the thing, but it doesn't sound like you're trying to max this out anyways. If you're putting that turbo on there, you probably could get to the limit of that turbo. Just saw you're doing a live. It's been a while since I watched. Figure I'd stop by. Welcome back. I was going to build a small block Chevy 350 until I saw the Big Bang video series. Instead, I went with an LY6. I have to say it's paid off so far. It's happened to go with all forged internals. That's fine. That's better if you want to do that. Then with forged internals, I think probably what you get to the limit of, I don't know if it's going to be then, if you have forged rods and pistons, it's going to be the crank or the block. It's going to be one of those things. The crank's going to move around or the block is going to distort at some point. Because then if you're trying to go to, beyond 1500 to 2000, most guys are going to aftermarket blocks. 9-to-1 on the Mercedes. That's good. That will work. Special agents in the house. I'm an other guys kind of guy. I really like that series you did. I deal with a 318 to 400 Chryslers and my hot rods. Cool. I'm gonna run the 5.9 Magnum fairly quickly here. More worried about the LS7 head issues. Yeah, I get that. Just have a reptile cylinder head guy address the valve seats. Could get them ported, but they already flow a ton already. Yeah, I mean the amount that those heads flow, an LS7, like a cammed LS7, is nowhere near taking advantage of even what the stock heads will flow. May have to put a cam in it. I saw your LS7 head video and saw you live. We're live. It's all the way live. Thank you for the information. Just drag and drive goal is 600 to 650 to run 10s. Yeah, 650 should not be a problem. Any kind of turbo thing would work for that. Oh, with the 3.2 liter. Okay, yeah. 650 would be, that'd be cranked up pretty good. Scrolling. Crystal Pryor. Yes, I see that comment. Richard, just wondering if I should get an air temp sensor before the intercooler after the core. It's an EGT gauge, wanting 500 horsepower, 454, 28 ring gap, mile 292. Oh, why is that all cattywampus? There you go. 78, 75, just want it to last. Okay, that's fine. That 500 horsepower is going to be hard to make that little horsepower with a big block. 6.2 L94, 243 heads, 4,500 pound car, 4L80 and 28,800 stall. What is the question about that? Running a stock crank and block, wanted something that can make the power if I needed, but I'm usually around 1,000 to 1,100 wheel horsepower. Okay, that's a doable amount. Yeah, we know that the LY6 did, and all of the Big Bang motors really did 1,000 horsepower runs, did lots and lots of them. Inexperienced tuning GM TBI systems for boost. Just picked up a $100 Cavalier 2 liter and wanting some extra power. I have not. I don't know. Usually the problem with factory TBIs is they're very limited in fuel flow, and they're also very limited in airflow. Now the boost cures some of that because, you know, if you pressurize the small hole that's going in there, you can get more airflow through it. But the fuel system, you can't really get very much more fuel flow out of it. Even if you put a big block injector in there or whatever, it's still not enough. And so you have to do something else. What cam and intake should I go with that setup? And will be too much compression for 93 pump gas. Is your L94, is that a flat top piston? If it's a flat top piston with a 243 head, that's going to be a lot of compression, but not if it's NA though. What cam and intake? Well, the low dollar way to go on your 243 heads is a Trailblazer SS, but a fast would make more. And if you're doing a 2800 stall, you could put a pretty good sized camshaft in it. You could put our Truck Plus in there. If you want to go bigger than that, you could put a BTR. Like if you really wanted to get after it with a camshaft, put a BTR Stage 4 LS3 or something like that. What fuel pump are you guys running on the engine dyno? The engine dyno has an Aeromotive, like brushless pump, so a big one. Like the LS3 with 243 heads is awesome. I've seen Take On heads cam LS7 bits. An LS3 with 243 heads is going to make less power than an LS3 with LS3 heads. World record on a Mercedes C32 factory supercharged stack pulleys with nitrous is 1150. Okay. What size heat exchanger you're looking for at the turbo kit? We haven't selected heat exchanger yet for it. We just ran tap water through it, or well water in this case, when we were running the stuff on the engine dyno. What pressure do TBIs run? A lot of stuff like the GM stuff runs between 9 and 15 PSI, depending on what injector style they're using in the TBI. We need more Shelby Cobra clones that take Mopar and GM engines. Yeah, an aluminum LS swap would be nice. Michael's recommending that you swap in a 3.1 or a 3.4. 2 small quick spin up turbos or a supercharger with 1 big turbo. Flat top with valve relief, 6.2 Escalade motor. Would the truck motors be too small? For doing what? You just got to tell me how much power you want to make. Not sure if you follow Dr. Tunemal, but have you seen his 3-bolt LT cams he's having made for use with LS timing gears? Need to see more Gen 5 stuff coming out. I don't understand what you're talking about. 3-bolt LT cams. So he's making LT cams, but that accept a 3-bolt like damper on it. Don't a lot of people do that already? What are the aftermarket cams? Well water is good drinking water. It's good intercooler water. Well water has all the vitamins and minerals. What pump to support what horsepower video would be good? Have different pumps run through 10 feet of 3/8 line to the motor and see what it can't keep up anymore. Oh, the pumps. I did a fuel pump. Kenny Bell has a fuel pump dyno, essentially. It's a flow meter system that they have. And I did a bunch of tests on a variety of different pumps that were really popular back then. A lot of Ford stuff, but some GM stuff too. And we did testing with it. And then I did a second test because they can vary the pressure, like the feed pressure. They can vary the pressure after the system pressure. They can vary the voltage. So it's a really cool setup the way that they have it. We can read the pressure and we can read all the stuff and it will data log it. It's all digital. So we did a lot of tests with, a stock Mustang, an 88 liter per hour pump, all the various ones, the 155, 255, all the way up to most of these in the tank ones. And then the Focus pump and the SVT one and just all kinds of them. And we did a bunch of testing then with boosted pumps, the 17 volt ones, the 20 volt ones. And then I did another test where we were measuring the flow rate. But I was feeding it with one of the pumps from the dyno. And unfortunately, I don't think that test that I did was nearly as consistent. One of the things that we were feeding it from a pump usually that was bigger than the test pump. And so it was pressurizing the flow going into the pump, which artificially increases the flow rate of the pump. So we get some really big flow numbers from some of these pumps. What do you think about ACES EFI? And all the other thing that Kenny Bell did way back then is they did testing with different lengths, different fuel systems. So from the tank feed all the way up to the fuel rail. And they put pressure sensors all along the way to see if there was any drop in pressure. And there is a drop in pressure from the base all the way up to the fuel rail. And I want to say that it was like 6 or 8 pounds or something at a really high flow rate, but not a ton. And so, and that's a tiny, tiny little, 5/16 fuel rail or something. What do you think about ACES EFI? I don't know. I've never tested any of them. The 3584 is an 800 horsepower and G42 is 12. Will the G35 be 1,000? Well, it's rated at 1,050, the G35. It's not a GT35, it's a G35. Not turbo related, doesn't matter. But where would you set the rev limiter on a low buck truck, 6-liter LQ4 with 560 springs, Trailblazer SS, 706 heads, and 1.75 inches? It's gonna be on the downside of the curve at 6,500. So I can tell you where the thing made peak power on the 6-liter that we ran it on. And then you can decide how much farther you would like to run it past that. Six-liter low buck with the Trailblazer SS intake manifold. Makes peak power at 6,100. At 6,500, it's making 12 horsepower less than it did at the peak. So it's still making pretty decent power there. For non-VVT gears, all LTs are single bolt. Can't the Holley HP do 4-cylinder as well? Maybe drill the manifold on a Cavalier and throw an injector in each runner and a better pump. Yeah, you could do that. You could weld bungs in and do that. I hate dealing with the 20-year-old hollow cam bolts. Always scared they're going to break on me. 6.2 Escalade motor with flat tops and valve rewinds with the 243 heads, 4,500-pound car. We'll buy a fast intake for burnouts and very spirited driving. Okay. A 2800 is a pretty good stall on a 6.2. You can run a pretty good sized camshaft in that. But again, I don't know how much drivability you want to give up on that. And some people favor all the power. They want to rev it out. Some people favor, the middle part. Some people want it to idle nice when they're going through a drive-through. Whatever. All of those things are subjective. So people have different values that they place on all of those things. So I don't really know that. You know that. My research all says 243s beat LS3 heads hands down. You are incorrect in all of that. There's no way that an LS3 head loses to a 243 head unless the 243 head is seriously ported. A stock 243 head is 20 or 25 down on an LS3 head. It's a little bit better down low, below 4,000, because it has smaller ports. But mostly because it has a big change in static compression, because we've got a 69 or 70 cc chamber head on the LS3 and much smaller, 64, 65 or something on a 243. So it's got a little bit more. But I've run that test multiple times, and a 243 is not in the same market, not even the same solar system. I'm actually surprised at how well the VS Racing S400 is holding up at 1,000 wheel horsepower. Cheap, but it works. That's what you want. What would you use for engine management on an LS? For achieving what? All the testing that I run is on Holly. I'm going to be doing Haltech now because we have a Rebel that we're putting on there. On Jimmy's Tahoe, it's stock. On my Tahoe, it's stock. So we run all of those. So watching an Engine Masters video, they do good stuff where they had the dyno hold the engine at a set RPM and measured output at that RPM. I don't understand why. I was wondering if you could explain it. You mean the stationary load? The dyno can do that. I mean, we can accelerate it at, I think that the lowest setting might be 50 RPM, 50 RPMs per minute. So it's a really slow acceleration rate. Or you could I could just dial in 4,000 RPM and go to wide open throttle. The dyno will just hold it at 4,000 RPM. And it will give you a readout. Once you stabilize it, it'll give you a readout, a power output at that RPM under a stationary load. That's pretty easy to do. What rear diff do you like to use? I like tall gearing. It's had a 3-speed 400 V8 with a 256-1. Yeah, for driving around, like my Camaro had a 308. The Mustang also had a 308. I was much more interested in top speed and stuff than I was, putting 4 series gears in it. .256 land speed diff. Yeah, 256 is pretty tall gearing. 3,200 stall and foot brake. Would it still build decent boost, or should I go higher stall? Mr. Rapid, I don't remember what your combination was. Scrolling. I can't find your combination. What is drivability like with the low buck truck? The drivability is great. How do you think it'll perform with the recipe I just listed? Was yours the 6.2 Escalade? I think I'd pick something bigger than that, because a 2800 stall would get you past where most of the people like the low speed response on that. So you could put a bigger camshaft in that. On a 6.2, the limiting factor is going to be those 243 heads. And if you pick a good intake manifold, the limiting factor would be stock 243 heads. They only flow 245 or 250. So whereas the Recport heads flow 315. So they'll support 600 horsepower. The 243s will support 500 horsepower. So there's a big difference in head flow. So, you need to look at that. I think it was in the rod length test episode, if I remember correctly. I understand why they showcase that part. I don't know why you do a stationary load on a rod length thing. I would think that would be a better acceleration rate thing, but like I said, those guys do good stuff. How much will the turbo kit be? I don't know yet. Bigger cams, bottom of the page cams is always the answer. That's what it was at West Tech too. 5.3, 862 head, stock bottom end, GT45, stage 2 turbo cam. I don't know what the budget injectors are yet. Just starting to build. It's on stock. Okay. For a GT45 at 3,200 on a 5.3 with a stage 2 cam, I don't know how much boost you're going to build. That's a pretty that is pretty lackluster response. I would just pick a better turbo, like a GTX 3584. Chop is love, chop is life. Do you have any more cams for sale? The down tested used ones? I probably do. I'd have to look though. Hot cam will get you better highway fuel mileage. That hasn't been my experience. You ever tested AFR Enforcer LS heads or the Summit LS heads? I think they might be the same head with different names on them. Are you talking about Cathedral port ones or Rec port ones? I'm putting some of those on my 5.3 that's going in the Mustang. I actually have the stock 823s. I was kind of afraid to use them since they're known to drop valve seats. I haven't heard that about 823s. I've heard that about LS7 heads. Just want to leave the line, descent the track without a trans brake. Looking for a big cam for a 5.3. I'm not going to have any big cams. Like I won't have any 230 cams for a 5.3. Would there be any downside to running a second wastegate sprung higher as a safety? No, probably not. Got 23 miles per gallon, even with the 650 Holly 4-barrel. That's interesting. Can a larger chassis dyno reading? Yes, unless you correct for it, but it will still change it because it's changing the gearing. I do a test with my 20-inch drag rails versus 29s. I'm worried about the stock. Yeah, I will change it. Then I should be able to adjust it. You can change the tire. You can change the dyno reading just by changing the air pressure in the tire. So I use the rec port heads. Hopefully I don't lose too much power down low. Did you say that you had a converter though on that combination with the rec port heads? Eric has various versions on the flow bench. 224 cam is a good. I don't like single pattern cams. I like dual pattern cams, but it will work. It will be better than a than a stock cam. And what is it you're trying to achieve? So we don't know, we don't know whether that's a good relative cam or not. Pick rec ports 10 times out of 10 over 243s. Yeah, they would definitely make more power. I mean, whenever we've put rec port heads compared to a 243 head or a 799 head, it always makes more power. I'm studying your videos. Got a GT, what I'm sure is 45 for $150. Going to be bolting it on to an 0153 4L60, not opening the engine. Okay. Yeah, a 2800 stall will be fine. Stock tires run at 80 psi and the drag tires run at 30. Well, what do you run that's 80 psi other than like front runners on a top fuel car or something? Rec ports are 823s, 821s, and then there's some other number too that I don't see very often on the LS3, LY6 style heads. I'm trying to get a bigger cam. I currently have a 212 or 216, 220 low lift stage 3 TSP with a 4x4 turbo 400, 373 gears, port of 706s with big valves. Okay. A 224 cam would be bigger than that, obviously. 5364. Okay, thanks, Jonathan. I don't remember. I don't know that I've ever even seen the set of those heads. Certainly haven't seen any at the wrecking yards. What would your recommend injector instead of decapping? I do have a friend that can float. For you want an injector recommendation instead of running decap injectors? We have injectors available on our store. We have 50 pounders, we have like 80s, and we have thousands. Why doesn't BTR give all the cam specs to the cams they sell? I need advertised duration. Why do you need advertised duration? LT 235 75 16s on a 1-ton van that weighs 5,800 pounds. So is that the recommended tire pressure for that? Wacko Jacko, like I said, we have injectors. I don't think 50s are going to be enough for if you're turning that thing up. 50s is for 800 NA. $680 flywheel on under boost on gas, and then quite a bit less if you were running E85. On the rear, 65 on the front. Okay. The website is Richard Holdener Performance, and it's a store. So I can compare them to other cams, and so I can get dynamic compression. Okay. I don't know what you think dynamic compression is going to get you. Duration at 50 is more important than advertised duration. I agree. There are some guys that want both of them, and I can sometimes see that because they're looking into ramp rate. But otherwise, if somebody tells me the advertised duration, it tells me nothing about the camshaft. They just give me that. And this thing with dynamic compression, people think that it dictates detonation. I don't understand that. Should I get a bigger throttle body to match my intake, even if not making a lot of power to need it? We went over that last night in the live feed. You should get the throttle. My recommendation is always getting the throttle body that matches the opening in the intake manifold. You got a 90 millimeter opening, put a 90 millimeter throttle body on it. You can also put an adapter down to your stock throttle body. Like if you put a Trailblazer SS on your 4.8 liter, just use your stock 78 millimeter throttle body, get an ICT billet or somebody's adapter to adapt from the 4-hole 90 millimeter to the 3-bolt 78 millimeters, 75, whatever it is, and run that throttle body, run your stock throttle body, because the throttle body is not restricting the power output of that motor yet. What time did the live start? It started 50 minutes ago. Dynamic compression is what gives you yes or no if it will tolerate 93 pump gas. Actually, that's not accurate. It gives you a possible indication if you have high water temperature, if you have too much timing, if you have high inlet air temperature, if you have a poor chamber design. There are lots of things other than dynamic compression that will dictate the detonation threshold of a motor that have nothing to do with that. So that's only one thing. That's what I mean is I'm not picking on you, but I'm just saying that the dynamic compression group over here that thinks that that's the golden rule or whatever, it's not. They're not looking at all the other things that affect it. And we know because we test that stuff on the dyno. Have you ever run decap injectors? I have. In my Bonneville Civic, which is up there, you can kind of see, we ran decapped, I think that they were decapped 36 pounders or something way back there in the Mustang days. The guys from Steve from Powertrain Dynamics did it, and we ran those, and that's what we set the land speed records with. We did flow them, and they were close. They weren't perfect. But the problem is when you decap them, you have to flow them and make sure that they're all the same. A lot of them are not. So if you decap 8 of them, you're probably not going to get 8 that are all the same. ICT has good stuff, but I might have some bias. There you go. They have a lot of cool, weird things that solve problems, which I like. So the Trick Flow 274 used a lot for cars and slightly milder 260 for trucks. If not Trick Flow, use comp cams. Are you talking about the Ford stuff? Ben, what's going on? Would it be worthwhile to zero deck an L31 Vortex stock bottom end when adding ring gap for boost or try to help quench? Unless it was way off, it's not something I would worry about. I mean, are you taking the motor all apart to take it to the machine shop and have it cleaned and have it honed and all that stuff anyway? Then you could go, yeah, just while you're there, you're going to do a cleanup pass anyway, like take off a half or 1/1000th or whatever, just so that it's straight. If your piston's 10 or 15 in the hole and you want to have it at zero deck, just have them take that off. Make sure it's not too much where you have to worry about, intake not fitting. So if I use a rec port head, should I go ahead and use an LS3 intake, or should I still buy a fast intake? Yeah, don't buy a fast intake. Just use a stock LS3 intake manifold. There's no gain from a fast over the stock LS3 on LS3 heads. There is a good gain from a fast cathedral port from any kind of stock cathedral port, but not on the LS3 stuff. The LS3 intake manifold is really, really good. I mean, if you look at the video that I put up, the testing that I did way back on almost all the intake manifolds that I could get a hold of, on the LS3 stuff, I ran carbureted stuff and fuel injected stuff. It's very, very hard to beat the factory LS3 intake manifold. My 408 with a slightly larger camshaft has 9.2 to 25 to 1. My old 365 10.5 to 1 has 195 compression reading versus 180 on the 360. Yeah, that's a cranking compression number, right? All right, very excited to have a chance to pick your brain. 2.3 liter SC on an overbore. Oh, a 2.3 liter supercharger. Okay, on an overbore 5.3 total rebuild, 1 3 millimeter throttle body. Recommend. Is that too big? If you're talking about the throttle body feeding the inlet of some sort of positive displacement supercharger, you cannot go too big. It will want as big a throttle body as you can put on there. If you're blowing through the throttle body like a Vortec, like a centrifugal, a Torque Storm, a Vortec, or a ProCharge or something like that, I wouldn't worry about throttle body size. But when it's drawing air through the throttle body, like a positive displacement blower, Whipple, Kenny Bell, TVS, any of those, then yeah, put a big throttle body on it. I have the luxury of watching in to see the parts physically, but they help you if you can articulate what you're trying to accomplish and what stock version you have. Yeah. Lots of dyno guys using trick flow and comp cams on YouTube. Are you talking about 5-liter stuff again? Sure, you'd have to have other question answered to answer it correctly. Have you seen Whistling Diesel's Cummins with 10 or more turbos on? Yeah, I saw that. That's very cool. It's out there. What's the current schedule for this live? We do live feeds. I try to do them every night at 7. I didn't make it tonight at 7 because I was gone. But I do try to do one every day. Dynamite L33, 243 head, stock cam, Trailblazer SS intake manifold, 91 octane, 11 pounds, 400, 544 foot-pounds. Seems 3,800 of a falling timing curve after that, thinking of adding a degree or two. Did you say what the timing was? Crank compression, is that because of the longer stroke of the 408? Do both of those have the same camshaft? Static compression is only one thing that affects cranking compression. 14 degrees and then going down. Okay. And you have 11 pounds of boost? You should have a rising timing curve after the torque peak, not a falling one. All of your low timing should be at the torque peak and below that. At the horsepower peak, you should have more timing, because at higher engine speeds, it will tolerate more timing and it will require more timing. That's why when we run, if you take a look at the timing curve on an NA motor, it has less timing under full load at 2,000 RPM. And then on an NA thing, it might have the same timing at the torque peak and the horsepower peak. But on a boosted one, you will definitely strip timing away at the torque peak because that's where it's going to detonate. It's not usually going to detonate on the top. You have to be way off on the timing at the top at the horsepower peak to get detonation. You don't have to miss it by very much at the torque peak. Night Craven, you can look up G35 online and see. Slightly more duration, same lift and overlap. Did you also change the LSA then if it has the same overlap? Impressed by a 225 slant 6 rebuild using forged internals and boosted to 500 horsepower and foot-pounds. That's a lot. I know Dulcich had problems with the one that he was doing. I think he ran a Torque Storm on his, not a turbo. We don't even have it. Well, it's a time to go. I didn't even put up a poll. 223, 231. Yeah, Crystal, take a look at the video that I have up where we ran a 224, a 227, and then a 231 cam all on. It was either a 6-liter LY6 or it was an LS3. I did that video where we ran those different things. You can see the kind of change in power curve. Switch to a 10-rib setup on a Whipple blower. My question is about overall RPM and heat. Is there ever a point where external cooling, modified intake? air can allow you to get higher boost levels, max out RPMs, or even surpass max RPMs on the blower. Lots of racers surpass the maximum engine speed of the blowers. They do that in racing all the time. They overspeed Vortex, they overspeed Whipples, they overspeed TVSs, they overspeed that stuff a lot. They'll take overspeeding them, but the other thing to think about, rather than just more RPM and more boost or whatever, is that they're going to be at, if you take a TVS blower, for instance, and you run it 21 or 22,000 RPM, the temperature coming out of the blower, especially if you're trying to run 20 plus pounds of boost, is going to be really, really hot. It's going to be really inefficient there. It's not designed for that sort of blower speed. So it's not just that can it physically take it, are you doing yourself any benefit? And what it's much better to do on a positive displacement blower is make the motor bigger and or more efficient, so that at the same blower speed, the boost comes down and the power goes up. What do you run for top and second ring gap for a 5.3? We run 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore, so somewhere between 26 and 30. Pressure map looks good for a Garrett G35. It is. They're really good. They're good turbos. If I sent you a log on a global file, what are you trying to ask me, Ben? Aiming for 15 pounds. But boost shouldn't be the, I mean, unless you're just using it as a relative thing. If you were running 7 and now you want to run 15, I would be much happier at 10 than I would be at 15, but 10 making more power, like with a bigger cam, ported heads, instead of a 5.3 at a 6.0 or a 6.2 or a stroker version of that. Just to have a look at it, I think the timing is pretty conservative. Well, didn't you just tell me what it is? And am I looking at a fast? If I'm looking at a factory ECU, then don't bother, because I don't have any experience with tuning those. Remember, you did 15 degrees across the board. We have done that before. I do not recommend it. We've done it on the engine dyno, and I think we might have done it on the chassis dyno, but that's because we have not very much boost, and everything's cold, and we have really good fuel, and we have an intercooler, and we have a cold air. We have all the things that we need to be able to do that, but you can't do that out on the street. Some diesels around 45 pounds. Yeah, that's not the same kind of thing. Not really relative. Compound boost things run really, really, really high. I always get also people like interjecting Formula One technology into the conversation. I'm like, look, it's fantastic. I love it. It's great. 18, 20,000 RPM motors are amazing, but they're not what we're talking about. They're not the average guy thing. What's the best cam for a Gen 2 355? I don't know. You got to define best for us. 226, 250 something. Is it, you're putting that camshaft in a 5.7? It has more than 250 degrees of exhaust duration? 636. 636 lift on a 226 is a pretty, it seems like a fairly unstable lobe. Seems like it's pretty aggressive. '97 Camaro. The cam's not going to dictate that. You got to tell us more stuff. Do you have ported heads? Do you have a ported intake manifold? How big's the motor? How high do you want to rev it? Do you want to drive around on the street? What transmission's in it? What gearing? All that stuff. Camshaft's not going to do that by itself. You got to do a whole bunch more stuff. But there is somebody let me know who the LT1 guy is that everybody recommends. I've only ever done stuff with comp and TPIS on the LT1 cams, but there's somebody else here that somebody's recommended, but I can't remember the name. Can more ring gap cause the engine to slightly burn more oil? It could if you got excessive on it. Half carton, 2,500 miles, no smoke, no oil in the plugs. But I did run 6 passes on 250 nitrous and tow a Camry 150 miles. But you're not seeing anything? Do you ever drive the thing at night? And do you ever step on the gas at night? Because a lot of times you can't see smoke during the day. But if you step on the gas at night with somebody that has lights behind you, a lot of times you could see smoke then. And if you see it, you're like, oh yeah, it's definitely burning oil. But normally you would see that on the plugs too. Ben, what is that for? Did you have a question? Like I said, if you have, let's say that you're running 14 degrees now and it's working. So leave whatever you have, if it's working, at the torque peak and add more timing beyond that. So add timing at 5,000 and 6,000 RPM. Didn't Freiberger put a 300-degree camshaft in a 600-inch F-Rod NA motor? I don't know, maybe. Hunter. The cam reference was the BTR PS Stage 3 Torquer. BTR on the folks at Stagmeyer helped assemble that 3200 stall. Have you run it on something yet? Do you recommend an MSD two-step? For what are you trying to achieve? 32 gap's a lot on a 5.3, but it still works. I mean, that's what we ran on the Big Bang stuff. Hi, baby. Hello. Come in. Come in. Hello. Is it time to go? It is, huh? Time to get off, huh? Tell him, baby. Tell him. Just tell me. It's called time. Joe Simpson and Sloppy have been a huge help. Happy to help. Some new piston skirt technology reduces oil consumption. Dual 450 air motos on E85. 100 PSI injectors, hoping to put 850 wheel horsepower, but still building it. Okay. Yeah, Ben, just send me an email. Dyno appointment is set for August 8th. Okay, yeah, cool. Let me know what happens. Those guys know how to do cams. On that note, Brady came and got me. It's time to go, man. But I will see you guys all tomorrow.